Good afternoon and welcome to our City Sports Podcast. Today we are here with Mr. Williams Bititbiri and we are here for the City Podcast titled Sports Washing on the Rise. We have with us our guest Williams Bititbiri, and also joining us is David with me.
Thank you very much, guys. My name is David, and we're on this podcast called Sports on the Rise. And today we'll talk about sports washing. So, Mr. Williams, we'll start again from the top. Can you define what sports washing is?
Sports washing is essentially a concept where the nation states, namely the ones in the Middle East, they are argued to use sports and top-level football and top-level sport in any regard to sort of cleanse their image. We know a lot of these nations have a lot of issues with human rights, and essentially what that does, what investing in sports does, it takes away from the focus around the country, moves away from human rights, moves from allegations against rights against LGBT, all of those violations, and it moves it towards sport, and it becomes known for the sport, and the sport becomes that sort of focus around the country. And that's what we have in Saudi Arabia, we had in Qatar with the World Cup, and yeah.
So to begin with, I just wanted to ask that now 2034, Saudi Arabia has been chosen to host the FIFA World Cup for 2034, and what's the sudden rise behind the Middle East becoming the main places to host such big tournaments? What's the sudden rise behind Middle East?
Well, I think first and foremost is the money that's involved. I think those countries have so much money, obviously originally coming from the oil. They have a lot of money, but then they have a lot of money to spend, and they're looking to sort of expand their, like any sort of business owner or any person with a lot of money. You want to expand your horizons and what you work in, and when you do have a lot of money, you do but then become very attractive to these top level organizations involved in the sports. It's not only just football. Of course, football, the World Cup and being held in Saudi, and was held just last year, a year ago in Qatar. We do see that it does. There is an attraction there within football, but it's also things like golf, things like boxing that we've seen recently, WWE as well. So yeah, it's very attractive, and I think that all comes down to money. These organisations, if you want to hold the best events, if you want to make the most money, the money's in Saudi, the money's in Qatar now, and that's the reality of the situation.
So contrary to the Qatar World Cup that took place last year in 2022, and it's now a year old. So since that tournament was one of the most successful tournaments, despite all the backlash and boycott calls and protests that migrant workers are suffering, and they are just losing their lives just to build the stadiums. Despite all these controversies, how did it became a success? It's because of the audience, or because of the money involved, or is the state also involved in sports washing when it comes to sports?
Yeah, but I think you're right in saying that it was a success on the pitch. On the pitch, it was a success. I watched it. I believe you guys watched it as well. It was a great World Cup, amazing World Cup, amazing spectacle. I think in terms of the way the matches were sort of organised, in terms of scheduling, I think that was great for anyone. You'd have a day full of football, and it was just a nice month worth of good quality football. And on the pitch, it was great. And I believe the narrative that we saw with the final, you have Lionel Messi going on to finally win that World Cup, and that's what it's essentially going to be remembered for on the pitch, is a great tournament. Everyone enjoyed it. Everyone watching and looking at it from a footballer's, spectator's point of view enjoyed the tournament, and that's why it was great. That's why it was a great tournament. And talking about sports washing, that's sports washing in full effect, because of course you look at that tournament and you look at the human rights violations involved in Qatar, you look at the treatment of LGBT, you look at the treatment of the migrant workers, and what you get there is, all of a sudden we forget about that. All of a sudden we're talking about Lionel Messi winning that winning that in such an emphatic way. Great final, by the way. You know, Kylian Mbappe, great performance, and we've got Lionel Messi finally doing it. And so what happens now is that we look years down the line, we look back on that World Cup and we say, right, that World Cup was amazing because Lionel Messi finally did it. That's what it's known for now. And it's no longer, the conversation's no longer about the migrant workers. Conversation's no longer about the human rights violations. And the conversation's no longer about the treatment of LGBT members. It's literally about Lionel Messi winning it. And that's sports washing. That's how you cleanse the image. Because now Qatar is now known for the country that held the World Cup, where Lionel Messi won the World Cup.
So the 2034 World Cup, can it be another case of sports washing since it's being hosted in Saudi Arabia, another Middle Eastern country? Because even Saudi Arabia is known for having very cheap and immigrant, like lots of immigrant laborers working there.
Yeah, I think that's what we'll get. And I think it's important not to forget that now Saudi Arabia has become and is going to become a strong footballing nation. I think it was Cristiano Ronaldo that said recently that it will be one of the top five leagues in the world because of the numbers of players it's attracting. Cristiano Ronaldo obviously started that trend in the wake of that Qatar World Cup. Obviously, he went on to move to Saudi Arabia. Cristiano Ronaldo, the most famous person on the planet, most followed person on Instagram, moves from Europe to Saudi Arabia. All of a sudden, all eyes are on Saudi Arabia. All eyes are on Al Nassr. And we saw this summer the influence that had with a number of players moving on to Saudi Arabia. Karim Benzema, N'Golo Kante, Neymar, top-level footballers. And even players in the peak of their powers, Ruben Neves at Wolves, Premier League player, he moves to Saudi. And that's literally because of the money. And I think because of the money that Saudi have, because of the money that these nations have, they will get stronger. And I think they are now an attractive proposition for players. And I think not only are we going to get players at the end of their career, we've seen it. Cristiano Ronaldo's moved when he was 37. He moved to Saudi. Right. So so then it looks like, it's a retirement home kind of league in a similar way the MLS was, the American League was for a number of years. We saw David Beckham move out there. We saw Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard, a lot of players that were successful in England moved to America to sort of on the back end of their career for a nice chill life, for good money as well. But now I think with Saudi, what we will get is players in that sort of 25 years old, players that do want that money as well, because it's the money, it's the lifestyle, it's outside of the sort of, because it's very tough. Europe for a number of reasons is very tough for football players. We've seen the schedule as well. There's a lot of people complaining about schedule, so I feel like we will get a move of a number of players going out to Saudi, regardless of their age. And I think that's very important to note when talking about the power that Saudi and the Middle Eastern nations will have in terms of football. They're becoming so much stronger. The recognition is growing, and I think that is important to sort of remember when we're talking about the power. So I think by then, 2034, it's 10 years down the line, essentially. But I think we will see more players moving out there, and we will see sports growing there simply because of the money.
So there is like lesser probability in a country like Saudi Arabia to witness another case of sports washing. That's what you are trying to mean?
No, I think the sports washing goes without saying. I think that is essentially what's happening. It's the image is being cleansed because of the players. You see, the talk about Saudi Arabia, you talk about Cristiano Ronaldo now. That's the reality. Conversations about Saudi Arabia, how many conversations are you going to hear that are about human rights? You're not. You know, you're going to hear about Cristiano Ronaldo. You're going to hear about Al Nassr. You're going to hear about Neymar, who's injured at the moment, but will still attract headlines because he's a top player and he's got a high profile. And I think that's very important to notice. And when you have that, when you have those players in Saudi, that is sports washing in full effect, because you are cleansing your image by investing in sports. So whoever decided to do that in Saudi or in Qatar, they've played an absolute masterstroke, to be fair.
That's all from my side. Now moving on to David.
Yeah, with the recent injuries we see in the football league? Is it as a result of sport washing, or does typically the schedule of the tournaments that the football players are going through?
The injuries are interesting. I personally think I struggle to see a link with sports washing. You could argue that maybe because the World Cup last year had an effect in terms of the number of games and the number of the amount of stress that players had to go through, but it's definitely the scheduling. And going back to that, a number of players are complaining about scheduling, and as much as you can create a legacy in Europe, Europe is seen as the sort of legacy. If you want to be the best player in the world, you want to be remembered, you want to play in Europe, and that you want to play in the Champions League, you want to play in the Premier League, you want to play in Serie A, you want to play in La Liga. That's because of the history, and that's because of the legacy of those leagues, right? But if we look at Saudi, Cristiano Ronaldo's gone over there. All of a sudden, that the Asian Champions League becomes a prospect that's really exciting for a number of players. And so, like I said before, with all those young players that are like take Jadon Sancho for example at the moment at Manchester United. It all looks like he could leave Manchester United this winter, right? He could go to Saudi. Saudi is absolutely a realistic prospect for him. The money's there. It's outside of the public eye, really. Is you can live a lifestyle there, and it's very attractive because you go to Saudi. It's less of a load of games. It's more money, and all of a sudden, Saudi football's on a rise. So to be involved in that is obviously it's obviously very attractive, and that's why I say in terms of the scheduling of a lot of the scheduling in Europe, players are being asked to play 3 games in 6 days. They're going to pick up injuries. You're going to pick up injuries through that. And players are going to be asked to play more and more games coming up with the new Champions League format. With all of these things coming into the game, players are going to be asked to play more games. So a lot of players will look at that Saudi league and say, I might fancy a bit of that, you know?
Yeah, I think that's all from our side. And guys, this is the end of the podcast. We'll ask Williams, where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, William Bititbiri on Twitter.
As in, that's it, guys, on the podcast Sports on the Rise, and I'll give Bara to sign up for us.
Thank you so much for such an interesting conversation, and I got to know so much about football industry and in particular, and was like amazing to know about so many facts regarding football from you. Thank you for being the part of this program, and look forward to see you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, guys.